Emotional mastery. Maintaining composure and focus when others become emotionally overwhelmed. Opening. Imagine the most emotionally grounded person you have ever known. Take a moment to hold that person in your mind. Reflect on what it truly felt like to be near them, not their words, accomplishments, or conventional impressiveness, but the essence of their presence. Consider the atmosphere they created in a room and how a conversation shifted when they joined. There was an almost paradoxical quality to being near someone like that. The more composed they appeared, the more commanding they seemed. Their minimal reactions increased their influence. When tension escalated in their presence, they remained unmoved. Their calmness exerted a gravitational pull on others, guiding the emotional atmosphere toward stability, clarity, and authenticity. They were not cold, which is the crucial point. Cold individuals are emotionally detached. They are not truly engaged with what's happening, not genuinely affected, and not authentically connected to those around them. Emotional mastery doesn't mean being cold. The person you imagine was warm. They were fully present and cared deeply. However, they were not overwhelmed by others' reactivity or swept away by circumstances. Difficult situations or emotional storms did not shake their grounding. That quality, being completely present with all that is happening without letting it control you, exemplifies emotional mastery from an external perspective. It is also among the most attractive, subtly powerful, and life-transforming traits a person can cultivate. Emotional mastery does not mean suppressing feelings, performing calmness, or becoming emotionally disconnected. Instead, it involves cultivating a self that has enough openness to fully hold its emotional experiences without being dictated by them, without reacting excessively, and without losing touch with its most authentic and deliberate self. This self is not innate, it is constructed. Today, we explore how to develop this inner strength. This conversation will address something authentic. It's not about techniques for appearing calm, scripts for handling difficult individuals, or strategies to maintain composure while feeling turbulent inside. Instead, it focuses on the authentic, fundamental, life-changing practice of becoming someone whose emotional experience is genuinely theirs, fully felt, wisely managed, and no longer the factor that costs you the most during critical moments. Let's begin. Understanding emotional mastery, clarifying common misconceptions. Before developing true emotional mastery, we must first dismantle several false versions that are often mistaken for the real thing. These counterfeits, each with its own significant drawbacks, are not only ineffective, but also actively hinder the growth of genuine emotional mastery. Emotional mastery does not mean suppressing feelings. A widespread misconception about emotional mastery, especially prevalent in cultures that emphasize strength and control, is that it involves suppressing feelings. This view suggests that mastering emotions means not allowing oneself to feel, pushing feelings down before they surface, containing them before they can be expressed, or substituting them with more composed, socially acceptable responses. This technique is called suppression in psychology, and it is among the most consistently harmful emotional strategies a person can use. Suppressed emotions don't simply vanish. This is a physiological fact, not a poetic metaphor. Unprocessed emotions become stored in the body through muscular tension, ongoing nervous system vigilance, and hormones that stay activated well after the initial trigger. Those who suppress rather than process their feelings carry their emotional history as a constant physiological burden which builds up over time. This accumulation often manifests in ways beyond their control, such as physical illness, exaggerated reactions to minor provocations, or persistent exhaustion from constantly rebuilding a facade because underlying emotions remain unprocessed. Suppression is not a sign of strength. Rather, It slows down confrontation for a future, more suitable moment. Genuine emotional mastery involves processing emotions, fully experiencing feelings without letting them control you. Feelings are acknowledged and passed through, not pushed away. This crucial difference separates practices that foster true resilience from those that drain it. Emotional mastery does not mean detachment. A second common misunderstanding is that emotional mastery involves caring less, being less affected by people and situations, and creating greater emotional distance from what used to matter enough to move you. This form of emotional mastery is often sought by individuals who have been deeply hurt, making the vulnerability associated with genuine caring seem more like a problem than an opportunity. They believe that caring caused their pain and therefore decide to care less, invest less, and keep a safer distance from true engagement. The outcome isn't mastery but the diminishment of life itself. Living emotionally detached might seem safer in a limited way. It reduces exposure to the pain of caring about uncertain outcomes. However, this also results in a life that's less vibrant, less connected, and less fully lived. While detachment provides real protection, it also incurs real costs, which are almost always greater than the benefits it offers. Emotional mastery doesn't mean caring less, it means caring differently. It involves being fully engaged without being entirely ruled by the results, loving without needing a specific outcome to validate love, and investing without expecting guaranteed rewards. An emotionally masterful person cares deeply and is genuinely touched, yet they remain unbroken by what moves them. This isn't detachment, it's a more profound and valuable quality, being fully present without being completely captive. Emotional mastery does not mean emotional superiority. A third counterfeit exists that warrants identification, as it can inadvertently emerge when developing genuine emotional composure without careful attention. Someone with greater emotional stability than others might subtly develop a sense of superiority over more reactive individuals. This quiet pride in their own calmness can lead to mild contempt rather than compassion for emotional challenges. Instead of warmth and a desire to help others find stability, it may result in aloofness, where their composure serves as a barrier, creating a sense of distance and superiority. This isn't true mastery. It's a superficial form that appears when real empathy is replaced by pride. It offers none of the depth in relationships, authentic influence, or true presence that genuine emotional mastery provides. From afar, it merely looks like mastery. True emotional mastery carries a humble awareness of its origins. It recognizes the effort behind its stability and remembers the falls that helped it grow. When observing someone in emotional turmoil, it sees not weakness to judge, but the shared humanity acknowledging the struggles and imperfections it has personally experienced. A truly emotionally masterful person is not someone unaffected by human emotions. Instead, they engage more deeply with their feelings, understanding them better, being more honest about them, and staying present without being overwhelmed. Their stability doesn't come from having eliminated emotional struggles, but from having experienced enough of them to understand their landscape. Genuine mastery is marked by compassion, not a sense of superiority. If calmness leads to detachment from others' humanity, it isn't true mastery. Instead, it becomes a form of armor. What exactly is emotional mastery? Emotional mastery is the skill to experience the entire spectrum of human emotions, including difficult, uncomfortable, frightening, and overwhelming feelings, while staying connected to your values, maintaining clear thinking, and acting intentionally. It means feeling your emotions without becoming them. You can be moved without being overwhelmed. It allows you to stay true to yourself, your most authentic, grounded, and capable self, regardless of emotional challenges. This concept consists of three components that we will explore thoroughly. The first is awareness, the ability to recognize your emotions accurately and in real time, before they influence your actions. The second is regulation, the skill to manage emotional experiences instead of being controlled by them, using targeted, trainable techniques. The third is expression, the capacity to honestly and thoughtfully share your emotional state in ways that support rather than harm your interactions. Every component can be learned, with each one building upon the previous. Collectively, they form an emotional life quality that most people have only observed in others, but never truly experienced themselves. Emotional awareness, recognizing your feelings before they take hold. The basis of emotional mastery is awareness. It's not just the vague idea that emotions exist and sometimes influence you. Rather, it's the precise, real-time ability to recognize what you're feeling as it happens, to identify, locate, understand its source, and evaluate its significance in the current context. Psychologists refer to this skill as emotional granularity. Research consistently demonstrates that having a detailed emotional vocabulary, being able to differentiate between feelings like anxious and overwhelmed, frustrated and disappointed, or hurt and betrayed, is one of the most reliable predictors of emotional regulation. This is because you cannot regulate an emotion if you haven't accurately identified it first. The vague general feeling of being upset is much more difficult to manage than clearly recognizing, for example, I am feeling afraid that this person's opinion of me has changed. Precision is extremely important. Let's focus on developing it. The body is the primary language through which we experience emotion. Before an emotion turns into a thought, influences behavior, or is consciously articulated, it is fundamentally a physical event. It involves a change in the body's physiological state that occurs first and underpins all subsequent processes. Fear causes the chest to tighten and the shoulders to rise. Shame makes the gaze drop and the posture cave in. Anger heats the face and clenches the jaw. Grief empties the chest and slows breathing. Joy expands the body and lightens the step. Each emotion has a unique physical signature, which can be read before the mind labels it if you know how to observe it. Many individuals are not adept at sensing their own bodies. They tend to stay mostly in their heads, and by the time an emotion reaches their conscious awareness, it has often been filtered through multiple stages of interpretation, rationalization, and distortion. As a result, the consciously experienced emotion is usually several steps removed from the initial trigger, shaped by personal history, beliefs about what they should feel, and recurring emotional stories. Developing body awareness involves regularly checking in with your physical state as an initial emotional cue. This allows you to access the core emotion before any stories or rationalizations are built around it. At this raw, physical level, before cognition comes into play, you can work directly with the emotion itself. This practice involves intentionally and consistently paying attention to your body's state throughout the day. It isn't about performing clinical exercises, but about approaching your body with genuine curiosity, noticing if it's tight, where, hot, constricted, light, or heavy. These physical sensations are not random. They serve as the body's way of communicating your emotional state. Learning to interpret these signals is the first step toward understanding what you're feeling before it fully manifests. The story conveys emotion. Each emotion encompasses a narrative, a particular description of the situation that caused the feeling and interpretation of what happened, assigning meaning and projecting implications that forms the basis of the emotional experience. Anxiety suggests that something bad is imminent and you might not cope with it. Shame implies that a core part of yourself is flawed, and if others discovered it, they would reject you. Anger indicates that a significant personal boundary has been crossed, and the violation feels unjust. Grief reflects the loss of something truly valuable that cannot be regained. These narratives are not always inaccurate. Occasionally, emotions genuinely reflect the situation, and their stories should be acknowledged and acted on. However, at other times, the narrative is a projection of past experiences onto the present, a pattern acquired in a different context that is being applied to the current situation with more certainty than the evidence justifies. Emotional awareness involves examining the narrative behind the emotion. This doesn't mean dismissing the feeling; it is always genuine, even if its story isn't entirely accurate. The goal is to evaluate it. Is this story factually correct? What evidence supports it? Could there be a more complete explanation of the situation that the emotion, with its intensity, might be overlooking? This examination does not suppress the feeling, but rather shows the utmost respect by engaging with it sincerely, seriously considering whether its story is valid. When approached with genuine openness, this process often results in a revised understanding that is both more accurate and more practical than the initial emotional narrative. The distinction between being triggered and being provoked. This distinction is among the most practically useful in the whole field of emotional awareness, and it deserves careful consideration. Being provoked means having an appropriate emotional response to a real event. When someone acts in a genuinely unkind, unfair, or harmful way, you feel an emotion that matches the severity of that action. This emotion is properly aligned with the situation and provides valuable information, serving as a meaningful signal to pay attention to. Being triggered is a completely different experience. It occurs when a situation activates an emotional reaction that is disproportionately strong compared to what actually happened, not because the current event is that severe, but because it echoes a past trauma. This might be a tone of voice that subconsciously reminds you of childhood feelings of being dismissed. It could be a type of criticism that feels as heavy as all the criticism you've ever received, not just the current remark. Or it might be a relationship pattern that mirrors an older, more painful dynamic you never fully processed. When triggered, your emotional response is genuine. However, it reflects more than just the current moment. It is a combination of the present event and the entire history that your nervous system associates with it. Reacting to the now as if it bears all that past weight often leads to an overreaction, which can harm the current relationship proportionally to how deeply the past one was affected. Learning to identify when you're triggered instead of provoked is a key skill in emotional mastery. It involves honestly asking, is my emotional response appropriate to what just happened? If not, if my feelings are much stronger than the situation deserves, it indicates that something from the past has been activated. This event doesn't warrant such an intense reaction. Recognize the trigger, respect your history, and separate the past from the present so you can address the person in front of you, rather than reacting to all previous experiences. Emotional regulation. 6 strategies for managing your emotions amidst changing conditions. Awareness without regulation is incomplete. While precisely understanding what you feel is very helpful, it alone doesn't alter how you act on those feelings. Regulation is the crucial link between experiencing emotions and making decisions. These practical, teachable techniques enable you to manage your emotional responses instead of being controlled by them. These 6 practices each target a different aspect of the regulation challenge and help build that capacity. Practice 1. The Name It to Tame It technique. This approach originates from neuroscience research by UCLA psychiatrist Dan Siegel and colleagues. They have identified a highly practical finding. Accurately labeling an emotional experience with specific language can significantly decrease its intensity. This is achieved by reducing activity in the amygdala and boosting activity in the prefrontal cortex. Naming what you feel accurately and without judgment serves as a form of self-regulation. While it doesn't replace processing the emotion, it shifts your focus from the reactive emotional part of your brain to the observing and meaning-making mind. Although this change appears subtle, it alters your relationship with the emotion from being overwhelmed by it to being aware of it and beginning to engage with it. Practice this skill in real time. When you notice an emotional response emerging, whether during a tense meeting, a misfiring conversation, or an unforeseen challenge, identify it. Do so without judgment or commentary, simply with clarity. For example, say to yourself, I am feeling defensive, I am feeling afraid, or this is the disappointment that arises when a hoped-for outcome doesn't happen. The naming establishes a subtle yet real separation between you and the experience. That small gap, the tiny pause between stimulus and response, is where your freedom resides. Within this space, alternatives to automatic reactions can emerge. Initially, the space is minimal, but with consistent practice, it expands. Practice 2. Physiological reset. Since emotions are primarily physical events, the most effective way to regulate them is through the body rather than bypassing it. Physiological regulation, intentionally adjusting the body's stress response using targeted physical techniques, yields emotional effects that cannot be quickly achieved through cognitive reframing. The most dependable and portable way to reset physiology is through extended exhale breathing, same as the mechanism used in high-pressure decisions, but applied to continuous emotional regulation instead of just acute crises. Lengthening your exhale beyond your inhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which lowers the heart rate, decreases cortisol levels, and helps restore prefrontal cortex function. Physical activity serves as a strong physiological reset, especially movements engaging large muscle groups that cause a slight increase in heart rate. This isn't about intense spikes that trigger stress, but rather moderate activity that helps process stress hormones. Examples include a brisk walk, 20 push-ups, or a quick session of nearly any physical effort. Our bodies are built to handle emotional excitement through physical movement, making this one of the most effective methods for emotional regulation. Applying cold water to the face and wrists triggers the diving reflex, an evolutionary response that instantly slows the heart rate and decreases physiological arousal. This method is straightforward, quick, and effective. When someone splashes cold water on their face before a challenging conversation, it's not just a ritual, it's a physiological strategy to attain a calmer, more controlled state for what's ahead. Practice 3. The widened lens. Intense emotions tend to narrow our perspective, focusing on the immediate experience while overlooking the broader context that offers perspective. For example, anger in a moment can obscure the history of the relationship, and disappointment can erase prior progress. Similarly, anxiety about potential negative results can overshadow evidence that other outcomes are possible. The widened lens involves intentionally expanding the perspective to reveal the broader context that the intensity temporarily obscures. This isn't about dismissing the intensity, I believe it's okay, and I shouldn't feel upset, but about genuinely enlarging the frame until the present experience is understood within its complete background, not as the entirety of reality. Practical questions for expanding perspective. How will I view this situation a year from now? What is the complete picture of this relationship beyond the current challenges? What truths about my abilities remain unaffected by this setback? Who else has faced similar challenges, and what lessons can they offer about potential outcomes? Each of these questions genuinely invites the mind to access information hidden by a narrowed perspective. They do not dismiss the current experience, but rather add to it, restoring a fuller picture that emotional intensity may have cropped. A more complete picture typically leads to responses that are more measured, proportionate, and effective than those based on a limited view. Practice 4. The emotional processing window. This practice acknowledges a fundamental truth often overlooked by the suppression model. Emotions that are fully experienced and processed naturally resolve themselves. They emerge, reach a peak, and then subside. Fully processing an emotion through feeling it deeply, moving it through the body, naming, understanding, and releasing it requires time. However, this time is much less than the endless effort of managing an emotion that was never allowed to follow its natural course. The emotional processing window involves intentionally setting aside a safe time and space for emotions to be processed. This shouldn't be done during a difficult situation, since processing isn't reacting, and a tense meeting isn't suitable for authentic emotional work. Instead, once a proper window opens, such as an hour, morning, journal session, or talk with a trusted person, the emotion held during the situation can be given the space it requires to be resolved. Writing practice is especially effective for emotional processing. When you express an emotional experience honestly, with detail and a willingness to explore its full complexity instead of settling for the easiest interpretation, it creates a sense of externalization and closure that internal rumination lacks. Once sincerely written, the emotion is no longer confined inside you, it is also captured on the page. This allows you to examine, understand, and relate to it rather than simply experiencing it internally. Complete the process thoroughly and at the appropriate moment and place. Allow the emotion to have the dignity of true resolution. Trust that once fully processed, it doesn't need to be held on to forever. What we process is let go. What we suppress is carried. Practice 5. The non-contagion decision. Here is one of the most practically important yet least discussed dimensions of emotional mastery: the ability to be present with other people's emotional states without absorbing them. Emotions can spread from person to person. This isn't just a metaphor, there's a well-researched process known as emotional contagion. It occurs when the emotional states of nearby individuals become unconsciously synchronized through mechanisms like mirror neurons, facial mimicry, and other automatic responses. For example, if someone nearby is anxious, your nervous system may also become anxious. Similarly, if someone is angry, you might feel more agitated. This whole process happens mostly automatically and without your conscious awareness. It's also not entirely unavoidable, not by suppressing attunement that would lead to emotional detachment, which we already noted as costly. Instead, it involves practicing conscious choice, deliberately and repeatedly deciding to be truly present with another person's emotions without losing oneself in them. This means witnessing with compassion, understanding with empathy, and responding with care, all without letting it transform into your own emotional state. The practical method involves a quick internal check when you detect strong emotional energy from someone else. Ask yourself, is this feeling mine? Did it stem from my own experience, or did it come with the person entering the room? If it came with them, you can acknowledge it. For example, I notice I am responding to the distress in this room without accepting it as your own emotional truth. This acknowledgement and the decision not to claim the emotion serve as the non-contagion strategy. Practiced regularly, this approach is one of the most valuable tools for emotional mastery. You can truly be present with someone in their emotional experience without becoming overwhelmed by it. This distinction is between empathy and enmeshment. Empathy involves standing beside them, witnessing, understanding, and responding, while enmeshment means getting involved and adopting their feelings as your own, which can undermine the stability needed to be helpful. The non-contagion approach helps you stay genuinely present with another person's struggles while maintaining enough of your own ground to offer real support. Remember, you can't lift someone out of a difficult situation if you've been pulled in and lost your own stability. Practice 6. The recovery ritual. Emotional mastery isn't about never feeling unstable. It's about knowing how to regain your balance. Even highly emotionally developed individuals occasionally face moments of genuine overwhelm, situations that temporarily surpass their awareness and regulation skills, where the emotional environment becomes more intense than their resilience can manage without consequences. These instances do not indicate a failure. in emotional mastery. Instead, they are normal human experiences of caring deeply about something, which naturally makes one vulnerable to being hurt. What sets an emotionally skilled person apart in these moments isn't that they never stumble. Instead, they have a recovery ritual, a well-practiced sequence of self-care steps that consistently helps them regain their footing. This process doesn't happen instantly or ignore what occurred, but it is rooted in confidence from previous experiences and familiarity with the recovery path. The recovery ritual is a personal process. For some, it includes physical activity. For others, spending time in nature. Some may engage in a specific creative activity, listen to particular music, have a conversation with someone special, or seek solitude and reflection intentionally. Despite the variations, these rituals share key features. They offer true rest for the nervous system, enable honest acknowledgement of experiences without requiring immediate solutions, and support a steady return to the felt sense of being oneself. Create your recovery ritual in advance. Understand what helps you recover, not just during crises, but as a familiar process, a route so well understood that even in deep darkness, you can navigate it. The key point about falling isn't that it never occurs, but that you have full confidence in your ability to rise again. Maintaining composure, while others falter emotional mastery in relationships. All our discussions so far focus on interior work, the awareness, regulation, and processing that take place within an individual. However, emotional mastery isn't confined to the interior. It is most evident during moments when external circumstances test our inner work. In relationships, conflicts, and intense interactions, remaining centered while others are unbalanced is not merely a philosophical goal, but a real, pressing challenge that requires immediate action. When someone directs their emotional chaos toward you, this is likely the most common and challenging scenario for emotional mastery, when someone else's dysregulated emotions are directed specifically at you. It occurs when anger, criticism, unreasonable demands, or emotional escalation are not just present in the environment, but are focused on you personally. In this situation, the instinct is usually to choose between two reactive options: fight or flight. Fight involves matching the escalation, defending your stance, challenging the framing, or responding to intensity with intensity. Flee means withdrawing, agreeing to end the conflict instead of resolving it, or saying whatever will de-escalate the moment, even if it isn't true or healthy. The third option, the emotionally skillful one, is neither. It involves staying present with the person in their dysregulation without getting caught up in it. It means being truly open to understanding what lies beneath the intensity of how it is expressed, without accepting that intensity as an acceptable way to communicate. Practically, this involves a tactical pause at the physiological level, recognizing and labeling emotions internally through the name-it-to-tame-it approach, and responding in a way that, at the relational level, acknowledges the person's emotional experience without escalation. Essentially, it communicates, "I see you're very upset about this. I want to understand what's going on for you. But I also need us to find a calmer way to discuss it, because I can't think clearly or respond effectively when emotions run this high." This response appears straightforward, but is actually quite challenging, requiring the full use of all the skills discussed earlier. When delivered with sincere warmth instead of cold indifference, it becomes one of the most effective de-escalation techniques in tense interactions. It provides the other person with something they might not have recognized they needed, a way to stay grounded that's different from fighting or fleeing, an invitation to connect on a more stable footing. When your emotional surroundings are consistently unbalanced, some of the most challenging uses of emotional mastery involve not just immediate crises, but long-term settings such as workplaces, families, and communities where the emotional atmosphere remains persistently tense, reactive, or filled with negativity. These environments are characterized by a culture of complaint, escalation, and emotional contagion that continually destabilizes. In these settings, the decision to avoid contagion isn't a one-time choice but a continuous process. It isn't about building a defensive barrier that blocks everything out, but about actively and intentionally selecting a different emotional tone than what the environment fosters. This involves bringing your own sense of stability into a space with minimal resources and offering it without presenting it as an alternative, a resource, and a living example that a different, more positive response is achievable. This is challenging. Stable emotional environments strongly influence and reinforce their norms. Someone who consistently demonstrates a different emotional tone is often seen as a challenge by those committed to the current emotional culture, not out of hostility, but because a calm person in a reactive setting highlights that reactivity is a choice. Reminders of choices that are not forced are often uncomfortable for those making them. An emotionally skilled individual in a consistently dysregulated setting doesn't attempt to correct the environment through urging or criticism. Instead, they maintain their own regulation with such consistency and authenticity that, over time, they become a focal point, gradually influencing the environment and causing it to shift proportionally to their impact. You are the cause of the dysregulation. This is the section that demands the most honesty, and it might be the most crucial one. Emotional mastery involves more than just managing others' emotional chaos. It also requires the courage to admit when you've lost your calm and your emotional state has become a destabilizing influence on those around you, rather than a stabilizing one. This acknowledgement, sincere, non-defensive, specific, free of self-flagellation but fully accountable, is among the most powerful forms of emotional mastery. It involves holding two things at once that the defensive ego tends to separate: recognizing that something went wrong and maintaining enough self-compassion so that the acknowledgement doesn't turn into shame. During that conversation, I wasn't at my best, and my frustration was unfairly directed at you. I apologize for how that affected you and intend to approach it differently in the future. Many might see this kind of acknowledgement, sincere and free of qualifiers, as a sign of weakness. However, in reality, it's the most advanced emotional skill you can exercise. It takes awareness, self-control, and the courage to accept responsibility. Such honesty can repair relationships and situations harmed by emotional misregulation more than nearly anything else. The ability to admit your emotional failures, honestly acknowledging, "I caused this storm," and apologizing is not the opposite of emotional mastery. In fact, it is its true embodiment. It demands the hardest thing: recognizing your flaws in your worst moments and staying fully responsible for them without losing self-awareness or self-respect. This balance, accountability without self-destruction, signifies a truly developed emotional inner strength. I want to conclude by illustrating what emotional mastery truly creates in a life, not only during challenging moments, but also in the fabric of daily life. Someone who truly masters their emotions through years of practice, facing failures, revising, and returning to ground, experiences life differently, not in obvious, dramatic ways visible to others, but in the deep, meaningful ways that matter most to them. They live with less needless suffering, not devoid of suffering, since suffering is an inherent part of living, genuinely connected to what matters. However, they are freed from the heavy burden of untrained emotions, the hours wasted in self-reproach over past events, the energy drained by constant reactivity to non-threatening situations, relationships harmed by unprocessed emotional spillover, and missed opportunities mistaken for wisdom due to anxiety. They experience a deeper sense of genuine freedom because emotional mastery, at its core, is about freedom, the ability to choose how to respond instead of being controlled by reactivity. It is the freedom to stay fully present with what is happening without becoming a hostage to it. It allows you to feel everything without letting anything govern you. This kind of freedom is the quiet miracle at the heart of this entire practice. They live with a rare and authentic presence. They can fully engage, whether with loved ones, their work, or challenges, without the emotional static that often arises from an unregulated inner state. This allows them to be truly in touch with reality rather than filtered through a story, as their raw emotions reveal true insights about their experience. That presence is a gift of emotional mastery. It is not for the world, though the world benefits when someone develops it. It is a personal gift, being fully alive to one's own experience, feeling everything, remaining ungoverned by external forces, and staying true to oneself in any circumstances. You will continue to feel everything: the joy, grief, fear, love, anger, and wonder, all as intensely as ever. Maybe even more so, since you won't be wasting energy trying to block these feelings. The key difference lies in how you respond to what you feel. Emotions will arrive like the weather, constant and changing. And you, the genuinely developed and practiced self, will stay grounded like the earth beneath the weather. You're not unchanged or unaffected, but rooted firmly in your core. That's emotional mastery. That's what we're building, the stable ground that supports you. Start by developing awareness and practicing it every day. Incorporate regulation by consistently using one technique until it becomes automatic. Apply this skill in your relationships, during conflicts, and in quiet moments of personal emotional work. When you stumble, return to it. Establish a recovery routine before you actually need it. Believe in the process. What develops slowly, sincerely, and with true care for your inner truth endures. The facade of composure fades, but the foundation you've established stays. Hold your position. Experience everything fully. Let nothing control you. This is the practice, the mastery. And it always starts right now.